My name is Bob Brown. I'm on the board of directors of Maryland Right to Life, and I actually represent Hartford County as well on the board. And I'm going to introduce Andrew Guernsey to you this morning. Now, Andrew is a native of Ave Maria, Florida, and a sophomore at the Johns Hopkins University. He's double majoring in political science and classics. This past spring, Andrew refounded JHU's pro-life student group, which is called Voices for Life, after winning approval in a heated battle with the JHU student government. Now, you may have heard about this, I'm sure you did, because this conflict received national media attention from Fox News, Washington Post, Daily Caller, Baltimore Sun, and even from former presidential candidates Rick Santorum and Mike Huckabee, among others. And as president of JHU Voices for Life, Andrew continues to bring a pro-life message to the future doctors and nurses, scholars, and civic leaders at Johns Hopkins University. Andrew.
Thank you, Bob. In the spring of 1995, 4 Catholic students from the Johns Hopkins Newman Center were talking about why there wasn't a pro-life group at Johns Hopkins University. And let me just go ahead. So a young graduate student by the name of Michael Walker in the environmental engineering department, he took initiative and he did what only you could do back in the day before Facebook and the internet. He flyered around campus. And so after he was flying around campus, sign said, join the pro-life group, Johns Hopkins. They settled on the name Voice for Life. He put his name and his number on there. The next morning, this student got a call at 6:30 in the morning from the Johns Hopkins security. He said, we need to talk to you immediately about the flyers you put up on campus. So Michael was pulled into the office. They walked in and said, the head security guy shoved some papers in the front. Can you explain this? And on the flyers, it said, promote white power, join your local pro-life group. And it had Michael's name and phone number on that, which was a bit curious. So this student is like, this doesn't make any sense. I was putting up flyers around campus. I didn't put up these flyers. So apparently some student who was a bit zealous for preventing a pro-life group from being on campus took the initiative to blackmail this student at Hopkins 19 years ago, starting Voice for Life on campus, framing it in the issue of nothing other than hate speech. So this individual, so he apparently disappeared. Rumor had it he went off to the seminary. And last year, so I thought there was a pro-life group on campus when I joined Johns Hopkins as a freshman. And so I went and had a conversation with campus minister, Father John Paul Walker. Turned out, as we were having a conversation, he was Michael Walker, this individual who had started the pro-life group, and it was his first year as the campus minister of Johns Hopkins, and his brother priest here, Father Dominic Bunk, here today. Fortunately, he couldn't be here in baptism, but so Father John Paul, he's been a huge support for us getting our group started. But so he mentioned, a couple things. He said, oh, you might have a couple trouble in starting your group, but we have precedent. We got our group approved eventually. I mean, they did reject the group, incidentally, the Voice for Life group on a technicality. So it wasn't until Michael's second year where they got approval to have the group. But I think that was perhaps the biggest understatement of the year on Father John Paul's part about the opposition we might receive for starting a pro-life group at Hopkins. I guess some things haven't changed in 18 years. And I guess Linda Brennigan here, they would meet over at Linda's place as part of the founding core group. So, you've heard about what's happened since, our fight for approval, national TV, you read the news headlines. Sounds kind of crazy, but what they don't always tell you is the stuff that goes on behind the scenes, and that's some of what I want to share with you today. Don't know what they have here. Oops. So one of the first things we did as a group were this abortion clinic's a block from campus. It's on Calvert Street. A woman died there in February after an abortion that she had an underlying condition. They had no training in anesthesiology or in CPR at this facility, and we have been out there, some members of the group, as well as myself, just handing out information and letting the people know in there what had happened at this facility. So as I went to get some members together from the Catholic group as well as the Hopkins Christian Fellowship, where we drew most of our members, although now we have Jewish members and a wide variety of people, rallied around the pro-life issue on campus. And so at my first semester as a freshman, we were doing this, and we filed for approval. We meet all the normal requirements. We create a website, constitution. We get 20 members. We have a faculty advisor, Frank, who's here today. And so we submit for approval. We go in for the interview. Everything's fine as it appears. Everything is fine until the student government decides to take up our case and have a hearing as to whether our group will get approval. And, well, the first group they heard from wasn't even us. It was a group called Students for Justice in Palestine, which actually is a group, it's interesting. They're quite a controversial group at the University of Berkeley. They've been involved in perhaps might consider anti-Semitic behavior and activism. And this group was approved by the student government judiciary at Hopkins. And they said, this is from their meeting notes, we shouldn't deny clubs preemptively. We can take disciplinary action later if need be. Because there was a controversy among the Jewish students and the student government, why are we going to approve this group if they're just going to attack us? And they said, no, that's not right. We should respect free speech, and if for some reason they engage in behavior that's in violation of university policy, later we can take disciplinary action. Not 5 minutes later, after that conversation, the group Voice for Life came up for reapproval, which I should mention it died off in 2010. So I did mention that. But yeah, so I thought the group was still around because it was still on the website even. It was that recently it had died off. And so they pull us up, and this is from the official meeting notes, since we weren't invited to the meeting, but apparently the Students for Justice in Palestine crew was. So they were there to defend themselves. We weren't, not unlike the unborn babies who are not able to defend themselves. We didn't think we'd have to be standing up to defend our own voices in order to defend the voices of the voiceless, but apparently Johns Hopkins was a little special. So anyway, so this is from the meeting notes from the group. Should Hopkins be involved with this much activism? Should probably move in here. Should a group be involved in this much activism? Because we listed all of our activities, including sidewalk counseling, volunteering at local pregnancy centers, doing the Cemetery of the Innocents display, some of the stuff I'll talk about, we even did as much as last week. So what else did they say? Well, they said, the SAC is concerned with people being made uncomfortable. And also, a pro-choice group has been deactivated because the pro-life group wasn't there to protest against. What fun is that? So they also said, quote, the group existed before. They're not pro-life, they're just anti-abortion. I'm okay with being anti-abortion, but apparently, I guess, they really want us to be pro-life so badly that, anyway, it's interesting how they use these terminology, and they denied us in an 8 to 10 vote. So by 2 votes, we were turned down, and then Alex Schuper, the vice president, called me up on a phone call. He said, well, there was nothing to. There's this link on your website we don't like. It links to pictures of aborted fetuses. He said, that's offensive. You can't have this. This is a school. We have decency. We don't want us to be associated with this. And this is the Hopkins name we're keeping here. What if your group what if someone in your group, decided on his own to go and, hand out a picture of an aborted baby? Well, then your group could be responsible and the school could get sued. And I'm thinking here, this is a university of higher education. I'm just thinking through these things. So this is the vice president. He issued a statement after we repeatedly asked, why were we denied? Why were we denied? First they were like, not going to tell you, not going to tell you. And then later, okay. So they said, it clearly violates sidewalk counseling in particular they took issue with, which we mentioned earlier. That's what inspired us to get going, that this clinic was a block from campus where a woman had died in this month where we were submitting our approval. And they said it clearly violates the JHU harassment and code of conduct policies as enforced by Dean Boswell and Rob Turning, who are administrators. We have asked them to resubmit their group proposal without sidewalk counseling. So they take issue with talking to women outside of abortion clinics, which they say is harassment. And we'll even see later, they said it was hate speech as well. Funny they throw these words around as if they know what they're talking about, as if the people who actually had to deal with hate speech use these words for love speech. Anyway. So we immediately appealed the decision. We had a town hall meeting. We're like, this is crazy. What are you guys doing? This is a university where 2 years ago we had the group, and now we can't because you don't like our activities. So we appealed it under Section 5 of the Constitution of the student government, which says you shall have a student shall have the right to free speech in all matters regarding to the SGA. The spirit of the sentiment shall be extended to Homewood campus. That's in their own constitution for the student government. And I mean, the motto of the university is Veritas Vos Liberavi, which in Latin means the truth will set you free, right from the Gospel of John. Which I guess as they nixed the cross from our logo this year, maybe they still have that at least in a vestige of something that's left at the university from a time gone past. But so let me just see what the next thing is here. So we got this email later, which I received from an anonymous source, forwarding what exactly the student government's reasoning was. This was from an email thread. This is from a student government executive who said, this is why we don't approve groups like Voice for Life, and he linked to, I don't know if you heard that group at Towson, which was a white supremacist, separatist group. And they said, that's why we don't approve groups like Voice for Life, because they're clearly like white supremacists. And I'm sitting here thinking, okay, so you have Father John Paul Walker is accused of being, white power back in here, and now they're like, oh, these guys are clearly like white supremacists. And I'm thinking, do they realize who abortion hurts the most? Who's getting targeted? The people we've spoken to outside the facilities, a block from campus, the women we've spoken to who didn't want to go in, but they were being pressured by their mothers, targeted indirectly in minority communities.
Yeah.
It's insane that people can use this sort of logic and apply it to the people. It's insane. And then we got this other email here. It said, here's some other nice little juicy tidbits. They said, we felt personally violated, targeted, and attacked at a place where we personally felt free to live our lives. This sidewalk attack on how abortions are hateful amounts to hate speech. This is from an SGA senator. Actually, I know. I imagine how it felt to the unborn babies. Jeez Louise, so much for hate speech. So he said, quote, we have the right to protect our students from things that are uncomfortable. Why should people have to defend their beliefs on the way to class? The issue is the sidewalk chats. That's not pro-life, but anti-abortion. And that falls under the university harassment policy, somewhere, somehow. And of course, they didn't bother to ask the university lawyers whether it was or not. They are just, they got into Hopkins, they must be geniuses. So I guess they don't even need a degree. But
Yeah, where were the university lawyers in all of this? Were they part of these discussions?
so they did. So what we did is when we filed our appeal, so the student government branch has a judiciary which was created actually to mitigate sorts of biases like this, actually. It was created by someone who was the president of college Republicans at one point who had influence. He was like, we need a judiciary. You never know when something would come up. Fortunately, they did, because the judiciary consisted of 5 students who, well, I'll get to the case itself soon, but we also appealed to the Office of Institutional Equity, and we asked them for a ruling. Is this sidewalk counseling, which they said, quote unquote, clearly violates the university anti-harassment policy, is that really covered under it? Because if it is, then wow, so much for free speech. And so we did get a ruling back, which was in our favor, but I guess we'll get to that then, because we didn't get that ruling until later on in the game. So, I don't know what I have. Let me see what I have next here. This was another statement from the newsletter. It said the university, this was the newsletter on campus, issued a statement. They said the university ought to all promote tolerance and acceptance. Well, that's great. It need not, however, provide funding and resources to those who wish to promote intolerance in the name of freedom of speech. This university should not allow its name to be associated with the restriction of abortion rights and the harassment of students exercising their legal right to choose. I mean, this is journalism, 21st century. So that's very interesting coming from the JHU newsletter, which, in fact, I think it might be the oldest campus publication in the United States. So it's a very historic newsletter, which kind of embarrassed themselves on this one. So what do we do then? So we're appealing this trial. Student government's hating us. They're saying we're harassment. We in fact had some members who would call me up and say, I'm pro-life, but you know what? This is accusation of harassment. Like, I don't want to be associated with that. So it was having a clearly mitigating influence on some of our members. But others who were more like, you guys are for real. So it was kind of a mixed bag in terms of how it affected our members. But we reached out to Students for Life of America. We made a press release with them. The Thomas More Law Center also decided that they would step in and help us as a legal case, which we could get into. And also FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, which is a nonpartisan, free speech active organization which defends the rights of students to express their beliefs on campus. So we had 3 organizations working for us. And after we released a press release with Students for Life of America, the next day, as I'm getting on a train, literally about to walk on a train, I get this phone call from some people at Fox News. I'm like just out of the blue. We hadn't got any local news, nothing. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, I just get this phone call from the Brett Baer people at the 6 p.m. and we'll see if this actually plays. Oops. Well, I'll just go ahead and play it on here. I don't know if the audio will work, but some of you all might have seen this. But we, just out of the blue, get a phone call from Fox News.
Hot topics, abortion and same-sex marriage. After a pro-life student group was given the boots, and a commencement speaker could get the same. Chief political correspondent Carl Cameron on the culture wars on campus.
21 pro-life students at Johns Hopkins University are appealing the student government's refusal to grant them official club status. Voice for Life was first rejected March 12th by the Johns Hopkins University Student Government Association. Student leaders told the pro-life group its plan to conduct sidewalk counseling near a Baltimore abortion facility violates university harassment and code of conduct policies.
Sidewalk counseling is about helping women. It's about nonviolent. It's about peaceful. It's about peaceful freedom of expression. And look, this issue is bigger than Hopkins. This is a trend in higher education of minority viewpoints that either happen to be conservative or pro-life are discriminated against unfairly.
On Tuesday this week, Voice for Life appealed but was again denied club status. We reached out to student government leaders today but did not hear back. The student government vice president explained the decision in a statement to the school newspaper this week, quote, the SGA executive board found that the proposed group, Voice for Life, intended actions as a club that clearly violates the JHU harassment and code of conduct policies. We have asked them to resubmit their group proposal without sidewalk counseling. The next hearing is April 9th, but Voice for Life is going around the student government and petitioning the university's Office of Institutional Equity to decide if pro-life sidewalk counseling at abortion clinics does violate school policy. Separately, Hopkins medical students are petitioning to have their scheduled 2013 commencement speaker replaced. Dr. Ben Carson wowed the Conservative Political Action Conference known as CPAC recently and is the world-renowned director of pediatric neurosurgery at Hopkins. Outraged gay rights supporters recently with this assertion that marriage can only be between a man and a woman.
It's a well-established fundamental pillar of society, and no group, be they gays, be they NAMBLA, be they people who believe in bestiality, it doesn't matter what they are, they don't get to change the definition.
Carson has apologized to those who were offended and indicated that if the medical students do not want him to speak, he won't. No matter where you come down on same-sex marriage or abortion, Johns Hopkins University is a private institution and as such does maintain the right to limit free speech on campus. Though critics argue doing so could amount to censorship, intolerance, and hypocrisy. Shannon?
Carl Cameron, thank you.
So that was an incredible series of events that converged. As you saw in that, Dr. Benjamin Carson, personal like role model, by the way. He's an amazing guy. We're so blessed to have him at Hopkins. But he had made some statements in support of traditional marriage. How offensive! And so he, at the same time, was being lobbied by the students of the medical school. You know, I guess he was hate speech too. I guess he didn't know, of being an African American, that he was really offending African Americans. I don't know why they keep using this logic of offensiveness, as if there's some sort of constitutional right not to be offended. It's amazing how intolerant. Now there's a diversity of everything except thought on college campuses. Anyway, so this was happening at the same exact time, and we also got picked up by some other major guys. You might recognize Andy Harris down there on the far left, Hopkins grad. He was a major support, as well as Cookie. She left. That's fine. So George Will wrote a piece called Johns Hopkins Institutional Intolerance and Planned Parenthood's Extremism, in which he compared Hopkins' ruling on us. So this is a Pulitzer Prize-winning writer for the Washington Post. Compared what happened to us at Hopkins to what's going on with the same logic that's being applied to say that, you know, if you have the people he actually compared it to Rick Santorum's thing with the partial birth abortion ban. We're saying sort of logic that's being used to silence discussion about those issues is also being applied against college students on campuses. The Baltimore Sun, Fox News, Daily Caller, you know, all these groups, Mike Huckabee even commenting, and Rick Santorum we'll actually get more into because he came to campus the same day, so happened, which pretty interesting. Anyway, so amazing, all these convergence of events. So this was on Good Friday of last year that I had this interview. In fact, I checked the time, it was 3 p.m. as my interview ended. I'm like, that's for Jesus. You know, all those babies that are killed by abortion, you know, that's the cross. That's where the cross is here. And you guys are gonna like this. So I walked from there with the Catholic community had a Stations of the Cross across campus, which is actually pretty powerful, which we have at 3 p.m. on our campus. So they saw, the student government 2 days later gave me a phone call and wondered why we were staging a protest using a cross of the rejection of the pro-life group. And I'm like, well, one, do you know what Good Friday is? Maybe, I don't know if they teach that anymore. But so they pretty ironically thought, oh, well, they thought this was a protest. But we saved our protest with crosses for later. I think you might see it in the newspaper. So they weren't too far off, but they were just a little premature. But anyway. Another funny thing, Hopkins did this. I saw this meme going around on the Hopkins forums, which I thought was kind of humorous of me. They said, wants to get involved on campus, starts offensive student group, makes national news. I thought it was funny, but I don't think they meant it as funny.
I know, because you don't look like you're menacing.
Well, I guess the guy kind of looks like me, but this was the student government sending us around. Good for them. Let's see, where was I here? Okay, so as this is going on, a few days later we get a response back from the Office of Institutional Equity. They're like, yeah, we don't really know what student government was doing exactly, you know, giving all their law degrees, deciding that was clearly harassment. Constitutionally protected speech is also to be recognized at this university. You can't see the full thing here, but we did get a response back, and it was still positive. But the student government, so yeah, it doesn't end there. So I went to trial. Actually, they worked out 2 people from student government versus 2 people from Voice for Life. I went with another good friend of mine, Chris Fernandez, who was a senior. So we argued the case. Well, the first thing was, so it was set for, I think, March 12th. We get a call about 8 days early, before we had time to prepare our formal arguments. We just got in contact with the Thomas More Law Center to help us formulate our case in the most persuasive manner. We got a call here, oh, we're gonna have a pretrial, tomorrow. And
that's helpful.
Yeah, and they want to throw out your case. Oh, okay, I'm like, that sounds fair and equitable, you know, the student government wants to get our case thrown out. So we went to the case, and here was some of the arguments they were making at this pretrial. They said, oh, you all have too few members. We checked your Facebook, and you have only a couple people joined your thing there, which means that you were lying to us back when you said you had 20 members. That was their first argument. And I'm like, first of all, it's after the fact. You don't apply that standard to any other group, and not everyone who goes to our meetings necessarily likes our posts on Facebook. Not even all of our members have Facebook. So they were like, oh, you don't have enough members. And we're like, that's bogus. So we got that thrown out. Then they're like, well, we can't determine the will of SGA members because, you know, they all might have individual biases. They all come from certain perspectives, so you can't take into account the fact that you got that leaked email saying that it's hate speech from a good 5 or 6 of the student government members. So they said, oh, you can't do that because you don't know what I'm thinking. And I'm thinking, okay, so I guess your statements don't matter. So apparently they were making that case, and the fourth one was saying that they said they claimed I was affiliated with the Center for Bioethical Reform, which I'm not, but they're claiming that, and I'll show you their evidence to try to prove that coming up, which is pretty comical. The Center for Bioethical Reform does graphic image protests, and they usually come to the median strip once a year at Hopkins to discuss, you know, life issues, because that's public property in between, which I guess they're reconstructing Charles Street. I'm not sure if they did it for that reason. I've heard rumors they were doing it for that reason. Not sure if it's true or not, but thought it was humorous that was even suggested. So that's been going on. They had this pre-trial. They said, okay, you guys got a case. We'll hear it to the full trial on March 12th. So we do that. And so we get to the trial, and they bring up this document to try to prove that I'm somehow linked with this extremist group as they see it. It's kind of funny. So they look on this blog post, and they look at a comment down at the bottom that I had left in my freshman year when I was trying to find out where the pro-life people in Maryland work. I looked up Johns Hopkins pro-life, and I saw this came up, and I was like, okay, I'll leave a comment. I left it anonymous. And I said, oh, there's some working to change the culture of death. Thanks for doing this. Hope you come back. And they said, oh, that means you're out there holding graphic signs. We can't allow this group. Even though we had pledged we're not doing the graphic stuff anyway. Not that I'm passing judgment either way, but still, that's just not what we're doing as a group. But they were trying to desperately do whatever they could to find some string to pull to justify rejecting the group. Because even that, if that's hate speech and extremism, even that, I mean, still, it's a college campus. But still, this is the argument they were trying to make. They managed to zoom up on this little tiny photo of me, and they took out a question mark, you know, used all those engineering degrees they pay $60 grand a year for at Hopkins, to bring up my photo and conclude this. Oh, so they're thinking they're all feeling good about themselves. Oh, yes, we finally linked the leader of Voice for Life to that radical right-wing extremist group. And
So they took a picture of somebody in that group?
well, I had left an anonymous comment
Right, but
back
I'm
in
saying
like
is-
spring of the.
But why would they, how did they pull up, what photo did they pull up for you?
Well, if you look here, there's a tiny. If you promise X and you charge for X, you got to deliver X, because otherwise you're engaging in false advertising. So you can't promise free speech in these broad terms and then deny it arbitrarily to a group and an association of students, especially when there's even pro-choice. The Hopkins feminists, you know, even at a talk, they had Erin Carmen talk about the war on women, supposedly, that's going on in the United States, going on the month before this.
Well, wouldn't they like lose out on federal money if you're not gonna have free speech? I mean, couldn't that, you could throw that little caveat?
Well, in fact, there have been bills that have been introduced. Fortunately, with respect to private universities, it would have been uncharted territory if we would have had to sue them on the basis. And in fact, Hopkins could have even possibly expelled me on the basis of suing them, which my parents were worried about. But I was like, no, this is so important. Like, I'm sure there'll be a college somewhere. Like there's always Ave Maria. That's where I'm from. My dad teaches there, so I'm like, that's cool. No, but so we were arguing this case. The university is liable for this. We were arguing, and also it's common sense. You know, the university is a marketplace of ideas. And are you saying also that if there was a Republican or a conservative majority that we could just arbitrarily deny, you know, liberal groups or LGBT groups or all the stuff that you treasure and cherish so much that you're basically putting up to the weighing of the scales and whatever happens to be politically expedient? Are you really willing to throw free speech out the window? And they said yes, in effect. But so that day, and we also turned out that same day of the trial, guess who showed up on campus, replacing Liz Cheney as a last-minute replacement? Senator Rick Santorum, of all people, shows up on campus. So that's it with some members of our group, which was really awesome. In fact, he called me the time before. He's like, heard there was a little something going on. I'm like, yeah, heard that right. So he talked to the Hopkins students, and he gave a talk on foreign policy, but people asked him about, go figure, abortion. So he gave some pretty good answers. I won't play the clip just because it's too quiet, but he did talk about our group, and he's pretty awesome, his talk he gave. So that night, we got a response back, and a unanimously overturned the ruling. Oh, that's
Oh, good.
a unanimously overturned the ruling, and we were given full approval. So, yay, so case closed? No. Student government, the student senators initially started revolting. They're like, this is crazy. We should pass a constitutional amendment to ban hate groups like this from campus. And in fact, yeah, it was mentioned on the platform of like one of the groups, this ambiguous wording about, you know, running for election on the basis of making sure that groups that the students would approve of are led on campus to represent the university. So, yeah, interesting, right? So then we get this group, which I hesitate to show this, I'm going to cover your eyes if you don't. Yeah, so this group called Voice for Choice, they a very unique name, right? They decided to name themselves very originally Voice for Choice. They've decided they want to file harassment charges against us for, oh yeah, this table here that we helped out with North Baltimore Rights. I'll just close this off so you don't have to look too much. This table hosted by North Baltimore Rights Life we helped out at. They were there throwing condoms around, shouting titties at 12, like mature young people, writing respect my body on their bodies which didn't have clothes on. And yeah, Roger's off my over. Ridiculous things, which actually kind of worked to our advantage because students were like, this is ridiculous. Even the students who were pro-choice were like, this is getting a little much. So in effect, that kind of helped us, the fact that we were bold and got out there and got such a visceral response from not only the student government, but also from other groups. So go figure, the harassment charges didn't really measure out very well, especially given that harassment code has a provision which says false charges of harassment are also prohibited by the harassment code. So didn't really work out too much in their favor on that account. See how much time I have, okay. So yeah, so we got the group approved. Next thing student government does is we find out the next day, oh, now they're trying to pass a bill to defund your group. They're trying to pass a bill. They close the session, have a closed session, and no one from the press, no one from the public's allowed, and they're debating this. Should we defund? Can we defund the pro-life group? And they said, no, we can't just defund the pro-life group. We'd have to defund all advocacy awareness groups. And they're like, you know what, that's a risk we're willing to take. They're like, let's defund the advocacy awareness groups, somebody, as Senator said. Tried to pass a bill to do that. I sent out an initial email to all the advocacy and awareness groups, including many who radically disagree with us, and was like, well, you guys really want this? How far are you willing to go to stop us? Because I mean, we'll be fine. I mean, we could get money from elsewhere, we suppose, but you really want to, you know, stop? Are you really willing to throw this campus as, you know, as an area of discourse about important issues facing our country? Are you really to throw that out the window just so you can stop pro-life voices from being heard on campus as you see it? And thankfully, the student government came to its senses to an extent, and they did decide that they weren't going to do that. Anyway, I guess they need to work on their PR, I think. I'm going to recommend that we hire someone for them. But so that's what's going on there. So the year ends out. So this is all towards the end of last semester of my spring of my freshman year. And so by this year, we decided to start off with something really non-controversial, and no, not really. We decided last week we were going to have a series of events on campus. We called Respect Life Week, including the Cemetery of the Innocents display, which some of you guys have the papers here, which we did. We had a speaker, Ryan Bomberger, from the Radiance Foundation. But even this display was tough to get this in there. I mean, it took a month of arguing with administrators And they said the sprinklers would be a problem. We can't have the crosses. You never know if the sprinklers might, run into the wood and cause fires. I don't know. No, they didn't say that. But seriously, there's so many roadblocks that often come up. I got a call from some groups there that said that. So 2 girls from, I guess, the SARS, which is Students Against Rape or something on campus, wanted to meet with me. They said this could be quote unquote triggering for women who flashbacks, all that stuff, which I'm not saying that it can't be a tough thing to talk about with many women. In fact, we did speak to many people who have had very difficult experiences with abortion, which need healing. And that's part of the problem, I think, too, is that they're not being recognized that need for healing. But even so, they even said, oh, someone could sue the university for having been, felt offended by this display. And I'm like, we had that fight last year. Do we really want to do this again? And the university was like, yes, we'll let it happen. We don't want to deal with this. We'll let it happen. And we were able to have a huge impact on campus. Huge. So we had up to 15 or 20 people at once just having discussions about the issue. 139 crosses representing the number of abortions every hour. We borrowed it from St. Mary's of Pilesville. So this was right next to the library. We had this last week. Powerful, powerful display, powerful conversations with so many people. And then that night we had a candlelight vigil. We had a guy play Schindler's List from the Peabody Institute. We had Father John Paul, the old founder, give a good talk. We had lots of reflections from students, local community people. It was a really event that brought a lot of us together to talk about the issue of abortion and how it affects our community. In a way that students who never heard about the issue or never thought about it other than in what they hear on the cable news were able to critically think about it. And in that sense, it was a huge success. And so one thing I last want to end with, a quote actually Dr. Carson made about the same time we were getting our group oppressed by the student government. He said, there are a group of people who would like to silence everyone and have everybody to go along to get along. But that's not going to be very helpful for us in the long run. Someone has to be courageous enough to stand up to the bullies. And I think that quote is very timely for our group, because it can be, where do we go from here? I mean, we're one college campus. We have a big name, but we're not the only ones being affected. In fact, just this week actually, a student from the University of Ohio who was starting a pro-life group was restricted to 1% of the campus where he could express his beliefs, which was out of the mainstream. This is a public university. He just won a case against his school where he was being restricted in his free speech. This is not something that's just us. As our case was going on, Eastern Michigan University, their pro-life group was prevented from doing a display on campus. At public universities. Ours was a private university, and we had all these troubles. So this is not just us on this campus fighting this fight, for not even whether abortion's right, but whether we can argue that abortion's wrong. It's amazing that the fight, how the dynamics have changed. So what are some final thoughts here I have? Well, if this is the pro-life generation, and I believe it is, well, you wouldn't know it at Hopkins sometimes. And if this is a pro-life country we're becoming, you often wouldn't know it in Maryland. But I believe it's becoming a pro-life country. So what does it mean for us in the part where we get such hostile reactions? And being in Maryland, being in the Northeast. I'm from the South, so it's very different up here. I think there's hope. I think our pro-life victory on campus proves that even though universities, they still celebrate diversity and everything but thought, it's no controversy, to be against human trafficking against poverty, but to be against the killing of the innocent in the womb, that's still considered extremism, hateful. And so I think part of what we did, what's been most effective on campus, is reclaiming the word radical. Because, I guess in the words of Barry Goldwater, just twisting them a little bit, I would remind you that extremism in the defense of life is no vice. And let me remind you that moderation in pursuit of justice is no virtue. To be pro-life is to be radical. In the true sense of the word, radics, getting to the root, because abortion hurts the root of our human rights. It turns the life-giving womb into a death chamber. It destroys what's most fundamental about us. And if all we do is a cupcake and a bake sale for life, well, people are going to think that's all that the pro-life message means. So I think what we learn too is the way we conduct our message, what we say, and the urgency and the passion with which we express it is just as powerful as what we say. So Johns Hopkins is the world's most prestigious hospital. Its graduates include some of the greatest medical minds like Ben Carson and Andy Harris. Not that I'm biased, but I think, in the words of Frederick Douglass, our solution is going to be agitate, agitate, agitate. I think that's what we need to do to win the fight in this area where what they want to do is silence things. What they want to do is have a nice country club where no one talks about these things and where abortion just is silent and it happens in the community. It's not supposed to be talked about. It's just there. But meanwhile, people are getting hurt. People are getting affected. And so I think what we need to do is to peel back the darkness. The other side wants to leave this peculiar institution of abortion in the darkness, throw it in the dustbins of history, along with all those aborted babies that they throw in the dustbins, never to be heard of. What I've learned is you don't dialogue with the darkness. You banish it. The truth breaks through lies, through the institutional intolerance, and through the hate. What is the real hate speech? Well, I think the solution to the hate speech, which we experienced, of all people, is love. When we speak truth to power, we speak with the forces of the millions of babies who are killed by abortion. So we might be small, we might be 20 students on campus, but I'll tell you what, the whole campus was talking about this, the events we had. The entire campus.
True.
Why? Because every one of us represents millions of them.
That's right.
And that's something which we can't underestimate, which I think I've seen people in my group who were timid about the issues or just were generally pro-life become leaders through boldness, through being unrelenting in our pro-life stance, to not give in. And I think that's what college students need to do. And I think we're changing the culture on campus by simply speaking about it. And thank you for your time. I'll take any quick questions.
How do they get elected? I mean, it just sounds like they're totally liberal in their ideas.
So many of them there were probably I would say there's one pro-life student I knew of who was on the student government who kind of let us know about some information that was going on in terms of general updates, or at least was sympathetic. So it's not everyone, but how they get elected, because most of the students on campus are pro-choice or pro-abortion, however they like to identify themselves. Yes?
Was there any reaction when you had the poster in front of the obituary? I know exactly where that is. It's on the first floor on the north side on the east end.
Of the library?
First floor of that building. The shades are always down. Mm-hmm. Were there any reactions from people who live in that building?
With respect to the Cemetery of the Innocents display we did?
No, the abortion clinic on County Street.
Okay. Were there any responses from students?
The residents.
No.
The residents.
Okay, the residents. Yes, so the residents have complained about, most of them don't know that it's there in the middle of a residential area. An abortion clinic, not only one, but one where Iris Domini, actually she just got her license back. Our goal as a group is to get that place shut down. We try to go out twice a month as a group. And in fact, one woman, we talk about sidewalk counseling. Why was it that we fought so hard for sidewalk counseling? Well, in my opinion, it's the most powerful thing you can do to make the reality of abortion relevant to a student group, to students who often hear about it in abstract political terms. Going to those facilities, talking to those women who go in. And in fact, one, actually I ended up calling Cookie because she spoke Spanish. But she ended up changing her mind about whether to have an abortion after some students from our group talked to her. So the fact is, these things oftentimes they're dealt with only in purely political terms. We, as a group, learn, especially through talking to the people whom it affects. it changes everything. And that's why we fought so hard that, you know, this is not hate speech. This is not, you know, intolerance. This is love. What we're doing is love. And if we give up that ground, we lose the debate in itself. So we were not going to concede that ground. Yes?
At any point in time, did it get brought up and pointed out, like, the inconsistency, potential inconsistency of, you know, the sidewalk counseling thing? I'm thinking there's several other groups that at points in time have had tables on the sidewalk, that have talked to people, engaged to people, that this is relatively normal university behavior, experience, whatever you want to call it.
So, I could clarify your question.
I guess what I'm
So-
saying is that did anyone from your group or any other group bring up the fact that other groups do the sidewalk thing all the time?
Yeah, you know what's funny too is, I mean, the community college down the street has more free speech rights than we do at Hopkins. I mean, we have this thing called the